For most of human history, the body lived in conditions that no longer exist. It moved through landscapes without shelter that could be closed, without temperatures that could be controlled, without light that could be summoned at will. Day and night were not concepts, they were physical states. Heat, cold, hunger, rest, and danger were not ideas but constant pressures acting on muscle, skin, bone, and breath. The human body did not evolve in isolation from these conditions. It was shaped by them. Every system within it, circulation, respiration, digestion, sleep, perception, formed in response to environments that were often harsh, sometimes forgiving, and always indifferent. In ancient worlds, biology was not supported. It was tested. The earliest human bodies carried within them no expectation of stability. Food arrived irregularly. Temperatures shifted across wide ranges. Injury healed slowly or not at all. Survival depended not on comfort, but on tolerance. The body learned to conserve energy when possible, to release it suddenly when required, and to endure long periods of uncertainty without collapse. Muscle mass developed not for appearance, but for repeated labor. Walking long distances, lifting weight, climbing uneven ground. Strength was distributed across the body rather than concentrated. The legs carried endurance. The back absorbed load. The arms balanced effort and precision. Fat tissue served a different purpose than it would later. It was not excess. It was insurance, a temporary reserve against scarcity. The body stored energy when it could, without knowing when it would be needed again. The cardiovascular system adapted to movement rather than stillness. Long hours of walking kept blood circulation steady and efficient. Rest was brief and functional, not extended. The heart did not slow for prolonged inactivity. It maintained readiness. Breathing followed the rhythm of effort and rest without artificial interruption. There were no enclosed spaces filled with stale air, no mechanical noise masking subtle environmental cues. The lungs learned to respond to open air, to cold mornings, to dry winds, to smoke from fires that burned imperfectly. The senses were tuned for survival rather than stimulation. Vision adapted to low light and movement detection. Hearing focused on distance and direction rather than clarity. Smell carried information about food, fire, animals, and other humans. Sensory overload did not exist. Sensory deprivation was common. Pain was frequent and destructive. Minor injuries accumulated, cuts, bruises, joint strain. The body learned to function with discomfort rather than eliminate it. Healing occurred through rest when possible, movement when necessary, and time when available. Sleep did not follow schedules. It followed opportunity. In ancient environments, sleep was shallow, fragmented, and responsive. The body rarely entered deep unconsciousness without some degree of vigilance. Even during rest, hearing remained active. Muscles retained tone. The nervous system balanced recovery with awareness. The circadian rhythm aligned closely with light. Darkness did not mean inactivity, but it changed behavior. Fire extended the day slightly, but it did not replace the sun. Night altered posture, movement, and social proximity. People slept closer together, not for warmth alone, but for shared alertness. Hormonal systems reflected this uncertainty. Cortisol levels rose and fell in response to immediate conditions rather than abstract stress. Adrenaline was not constant. It was reserved, released quickly, cleared efficiently. Chronic stimulation was rare. The immune system operated in a world without sterility. The body encountered bacteria, parasites, and injuries regularly. Immune responses developed through exposure rather than avoidance. Inflammation was common but not prolonged. The system reacted, resolved, and moved on. Digestion followed irregular intake. Meals were not evenly spaced. Food composition changed with seasons and availability. The digestive tract adapted to variation, extracting nutrients from roots, meat, seeds, and plants without consistency. Fasting was not intentional, it was structural. The body became efficient at switching between fuel sources. Glucose availability fluctuated. Fat metabolism played a central role. Hunger was familiar, not alarming. It sharpened attention rather than causing panic. Reproduction occurred within this framework. Pregnancy, birth, and child development unfolded without controlled environments. Infant survival depended on physical proximity, constant movement, and shared warmth. The mother's body adjusted posture, gait, and energy use to accommodate caregiving. Growth was slower. Maturation took time. Bone density developed through repeated load-bearing activity. Skeletal alignment reflected movement patterns across uneven terrain. The body grew into its environment rather than being protected from it. Aging was visible and cumulative. Wear accumulated gradually, joints stiffened, teeth eroded, vision softened. But decline followed use rather than inactivity. Bodies aged through labor, not idleness. In these ancient worlds, biology functioned without separation from surroundings. There was no boundary between internal systems and external conditions. The skin was not a barrier so much as an interface. Temperature, moisture, pressure, and injury passed through it continuously. The nervous system developed without constant stimulation. Silence was common. Darkness was familiar. The brain did not require novelty to remain engaged. It required meaning, movement, purpose tied directly to survival. Social bonds influenced physiology. Cooperation reduced individual strain. Shared labor distributed effort. Group sleeping reduced vigilance costs. The body responded to social presence with reduced tension and improved recovery. Fear existed, but it was specific, immediate. It rose and resolved. It did not linger without cause. The ancient body lived in cycles that were physical rather than abstract. Hunger led to food. Fatigue led to rest. Cold led to fire or movement. Pain led to caution. Recovery followed naturally when conditions allowed. There was no concept of optimization. There was only adaptation. And through thousands of generations, the body refined itself within these constraints, not toward perfection, but toward resilience, toward surviving long enough to continue. The nervous system in ancient environments carried a different burden than it does now. It was not asked to process constant information. It was asked to interpret signals that mattered, a sound in the distance, a shift in wind, the movement of animals through brush. Attention was narrow, purposeful, and temporary. When danger passed, the system settled. There was no sustained alertness without cause. This allowed recovery to occur naturally. The parasympathetic state, rest, digestion, repair, was not interrupted repeatedly. When safety was present even briefly, the body used it fully. Muscles released tension. Breathing deepened. Blood flow redistributed away from extremities and toward internal repair. Stress, as a biological process, existed in pulses. It was sharp and short. The body was not designed to remain under constant low-level strain. In ancient worlds, it did not have to. Temperature regulation depended on behavior more than insulation. Clothing was minimal and variable. Fire provided localized heat, not uniform warmth. The body learned to respond dynamically. Blood vessels constricted and dilated efficiently. Shivering generated heat when needed. Movement replaced mechanical comfort. Cold exposure was routine, not extreme, but consistent. This trained metabolic systems to produce heat efficiently. Heat exposure, likewise, was managed through shade, rest, and timing, rather than climate control. The body adapted by regulating sweat and conserving fluids. Water intake followed availability. Hydration was not continuous. The kidneys evolved to conserve water during scarcity and eliminate waste efficiently when supply returned. Electrolyte balance shifted naturally with activity and diet. The skeletal system developed under constant load. Bones strengthened where stress was applied. Joints adapted to repeated motion patterns. There was little prolonged sitting. The spine rarely remained compressed for extended periods. Posture shifted throughout the day, distributing strain. Foot structure reflected terrain. Walking barefoot or with minimal protection strengthened arches and ankle stability. Balance was trained unconsciously through uneven ground. Falls were common, but learned from early. The body refined coordination continuously. Vision adapted to depth and movement rather than screens or fixed distances. The eyes tracked far horizons, near tasks, and low-light conditions without artificial assistance. Eye muscles remained active. Focus shifted frequently. The digestive microbiome formed through direct contact with soil, animals, and unprocessed foods. Diversity was high. The immune system learned tolerance as well as defense. Allergic responses were less pronounced, as exposure was constant rather than sudden. Illness existed, but patterns differed. Acute infections were dangerous. Chronic metabolic conditions were rare. The body expended energy on immediate survival rather than long-term imbalance. Energy expenditure matched intake closely. There was little surplus. Excess energy was stored briefly and used. The concept of constant abundance did not shape biology. Children developed within this framework. Movement began early, crawling, climbing, walking across irregular surfaces. Motor skills refined through necessity. Play mirrored survival tasks. Coordination, strength, and spatial awareness formed naturally. Learning occurred through observation and repetition rather than instruction. The brain developed pattern recognition rather than abstraction. Memory tied to place, smell, sound, and movement. Sleep remained light and adaptive. Long, uninterrupted sleep was uncommon. Short sleep cycles repeated when safety allowed. The body adjusted hormone release accordingly. Growth hormone secretion aligned with physical fatigue rather than clock time. Dreaming may have served a different function. Without constant stimulation, the mind processed real experiences deeply. Memory consolidation focused on survival-relevant information. The ancient body did not separate mind and physiology. Thought influenced movement. Emotion altered posture and breath. There was no conceptual distinction between mental state and physical readiness. Pain tolerance reflected necessity. Discomfort did not immediately alter behavior unless it impaired function. The nervous system learned threshold based on consequence, not sensation alone. Injury recovery relied on immobilization when possible and movement when required. There were no rigid protocols. Healing followed natural cues. Swelling, warmth, stiffness, all were signals interpreted through experience. Social hierarchy influenced stress exposure. Dominance reduced vigilance. Subordination increased it. But roles were fluid. Cooperation mattered more than control. Shared success reduced individual strain. Death was visible. Mortality was understood without abstraction. This shaped risk assessment. The body learned caution through observation as much as experience. Throughout all of this, the human organism remained flexible. It adjusted quickly to changing conditions. Its systems were interconnected and responsive. There was little separation between environment and internal state. Biology did not aim for comfort, it aimed for continuity. The ancient body survived not because conditions were gentle, but because it adapted without excess, without constant interference, and without expectations beyond the present moment. And in that simplicity, resilience was maintained. As environment shifted slowly over generations, the body carried its adaptations forward without awareness. There was no anticipation of future conditions. Biology responded only to what was present. Climate changes altered movement patterns. Migration reshaped diet. New tools changed how force was applied to muscle and bone. But these changes unfolded gradually, allowing the body to adjust without shock. Fire altered digestion more than any other single factor. Cooked food reduced the energy required to extract nutrients. Jaw muscles diminished over time. Teeth changed shape. The digestive tract shortened slightly, reallocating energy to other systems. This shift did not remove hardship, but it changed efficiency. Tool use refined motor control. Hands adapted to precision. Grip strength balanced delicacy and power. Repetitive fine movement trained neural pathways associated with coordination rather than speed. Shelter changed exposure without eliminating it. Caves, huts, and natural enclosures moderated wind and temperature but remained permeable. Light shifted slowly. Darkness remained intact. The body continued to experience natural cycles without artificial extension. Social organization influenced biology subtly. Shared resources reduced extreme scarcity. Division of labor distributed physical stress unevenly. Some bodies specialized in endurance, others in strength or precision. Variation increased rather than diminished. As settlements stabilized, movement patterns altered. Long migrations decreased. Repetitive local movement increased. Joints adapted accordingly. Wear localized rather than generalized. Diet diversity fluctuated. Agriculture was not yet dominant. Seasonal variation remained strong. The body continued to experience cycles of abundance and restraint. Reproductive strategies adjusted to survival probability. Infant care remained intensive. Proximity remained constant. The nervous system of children developed within continuous physical contact, regulating stress through presence rather than isolation. The endocrine system remained responsive rather than predictive. Hormones responded to immediate needs. There was little anticipation of abstract futures. Energy was allocated to present function. Over time, cultural knowledge began to reduce certain risks. Fire management improved, hunting techniques became more efficient, but biology remained conservative. It did not optimize quickly. It preserved what worked. The body's design favored redundancy. Multiple systems supported the same outcome. If one failed, another compensated. This ensured survival under unpredictable conditions. As environments gradually transitioned toward more permanent settlements, the body did not immediately change. Biology lagged behind culture. Structures evolved faster than physiology. The ancient body entered new contexts, carrying older expectations. It still prepared for scarcity. It still conserved energy. It still relied on movement for regulation. Sleep patterns adjusted slowly. Darkness receded slightly. Firelight extended evenings but did not disrupt circadian rhythms fully. The body remained anchored to solar cycles. Noise levels remained low. Silence was still present. The nervous system rested between demands. Over generations, these patterns accumulated. The human body became increasingly adaptable, not because it anticipated change, but because it retained flexibility. This flexibility allowed survival across deserts, forests, tundra, and coastlines. It allowed adjustment without specialization to a single environment. The cost of this adaptability was constant readiness. The body never fully relaxed into predictability. But this readiness preserved life. As ancient worlds gradually faded, the biological foundations they shaped remained embedded. Muscles still respond to movement. The nervous system still seeks cycles of tension and release. Sleep still depends on safety more than scheduling. The body remains an inheritance from environments where survival depended on direct engagement with surroundings. It carries systems designed for variability rather than control, for responsiveness rather than optimization, for endurance rather than efficiency alone. These traits were not consciously chosen. They were selected quietly, through repetition and survival. And even as conditions change, the biology shaped in ancient worlds continues to function according to rules formed long before stability existed. It does not demand comfort. It demands alignment. And when alignment is present even briefly, the body settles, not because the world is safe, but because for a moment it resembles the conditions it was built to endure.